R&B podcast. Yeah, I'm talking about that R&B with Russ and Blake, baby. R&B podcast. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's Russ and Blake, top of the morning. Thank God for giving us this opportunity, of course. Thank you for joining us this morning. Please like, subscribe, and share if you get anything out of this conversation today. And I can almost guarantee you will, because this is something that everyone will be able to relate to. If you're with us last week, we talked about artificial intelligence, which might have threw y'all for a little curveball, but I'm sure since listening to that episode, you've heard something in the media regarding artificial intelligence. So you can see the importance of that topic and why we talked about it when we did. But today we're going to reel it back in to the inner piece of these conversations and discuss emotions. I hope you didn't turn it off, because that's a little scary. Some people don't like to talk about emotions, right? But today we're going to do it, and I promise that we'll try to operate in a way where we are being a little vulnerable for you, so we can all relate and hopefully be on the same page and be a little more empathetic towards each other. Russ, what you got to say this morning?
Well, I love how you started that off saying that we're going to be a little bit vulnerable, because that's what it's going to take for us to be able to relate to you, right? A lot of the times when we're talking about our emotions, I feel like we want to act as if we don't get hit with those times where we need to have better self-talk, or where we need to kind of maybe even take some time off and reset, right? And I always like to think, like, who are you when you're by yourself? Who are you when you're isolated? Because that's truly who you are. And a lot of the times that's when we have to deal with our emotions and deal with our inner being and tweak what we need to, so that we can go back out in the world and be as positive and effective as possible.
Yeah. And a lot of people are really big on privacy, and a lot of people hold in a lot of their emotional manifestations. And being vulnerable and discussing your emotions, understanding your emotions, understanding other people's emotions will be very beneficial in maintaining and developing a peace of mind, because it's relieving to be able to have that stress that's inside be displaced on the external a little bit. You know, dealing with all that on yourself and trying to process that with your own thoughts can be very troubling. So having discussions like I do with Russ help me to process my emotions. And, you know, emotions are not black and white. There's a lot of subjectivity that goes into the emotional process, and an emotion itself does stimulate a physical response. So we have to be aware of that and understand the piece of emotion that we cannot control, but also understand that there are things we can do to be in more control of those said emotions.
Yeah. And you should have no qualms about using the people in your life or using other people to help reorient you towards that better way of dealing with your emotions. That's kind of what we're here for.
Right.
I feel like we're all here as almost like bumper cars to kind of push each other back into the right directions and help reorient.
Right. Yep. And so, again, being resourceful, using each other, and being there for one another, very important. And developing that trust, having that trust in the people that are close to you, to have a safe emotional space, something that I have to do very frequently in the hospital setting, gain the trust of my patients and my coworkers, because we go through very emotional situations in the hospital, right? Nobody wants to be in the hospital. A lot of depressing things take place, unfortunate events, very high stress environment. So, you know, just 2 days ago, I was taking care of a family where the emotions were so high in the room, and I felt very centered that day, and I was very grateful for that, because we all have our ups and downs. I get in front of the camera and I seem calm, but I'm not always calm.
Mm.
Nobody's always calm. Nobody's always happy. We just like the stock market goes up and down. We want to make higher highs and higher lows in terms of the ups and downs that we're making, rather than lower highs and lower lows in a downtrend. So that's an analogy as far as finances and the process is going on inside of you as well. But in me controlling that situation in the hospital, being aware of the emotions that the people around me were experiencing, and being aware of the situation and understanding that it makes sense for the emotions to be high here, right? I'm not
Yeah.
going to discredit anyone for being upset, and I'm not going to take anything personally at this moment, because I know that it's not because of me. This situation is bigger than me. And so using that level of empathy and trying to understand the emotions of other people makes it easier for me to control my emotions, because I know that this negative situation that I'm in is not because of me. So anything that may be directed towards me, I know that it's not intentional, and that's just that person processing their emotions.
Yeah, and I'm sure as we get deeper into this conversation, we're going to be talking about not taking things personal, because that seems to be a key. And just a little background on my work experience and how I need to be emotionally intelligent. I work day to day with kids that have been diagnosed with emotional disabilities, literally
Right.
ED, right? So I have to be able to communicate with their parents as well. And sometimes that takes me having a very clinical lens, because the parent sometimes can feel like the whole world is looking at them like, hey, your student or your child makes these choices for these types of behaviors. And is that a reflection of you not understanding that the child does have a disability? And you need to be very sensitive to not only the child's needs, but also the parent's perspective. These are adults that are now dealing with getting phone calls all the time about some type of aggressive behavior, or their student is being removed from populations and populations to try to figure out where they're going to be able to have an actual successful, day-to-day experience. And for me, being like the middleman between both of them, I need to be able to check my emotions, make sure that they don't run too high, never take anything personal, understand that we're here to clinically help and try to support. And that takes me going home and doing a lot of inner work by myself, because
Yeah.
I can't be there to support if I don't support myself.
Right,
Right. So
right.
it's pretty big.
And that's the argument I always make. You can't really help other people unless you're helping yourself and building upon your own structure, right? Making sure that you're resilient and making sure that you're at peace.
That's how you find yourself cussing people out.
Right, right,
At work.
right, at work too. Which we've seen that happen in a lot of different settings, and that's just never acceptable. And in the hospital setting, again, high stress environment, sometimes we give people an excuse for poor reaction, emotional behavior. I call myself an emotional person. A lot of people think that's negative. I think it's good. I'm aware of my emotions. I'm in touch with my emotions. Some people are emotional, but don't know they are emotional and don't understand their emotions. And then they have emotion explosions. And those are not favorable reactions, but a lot of highly respected people, very intelligent people, tend, or I wouldn't say like generalize that those people tend to do this, but there are people that have tendencies to be more explosive, and that's just a lack of emotional intelligence or awareness. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed right when it's recognized, because again, in a setting like the hospital, that can be very disruptive to our productivity and our efficiency as a group. And people have to be open to constructive criticism when someone else notices that your emotion or your reaction may not be favorable. Sometimes doctors will get a pass and be like, "Oh, that's just how they are," but they do a great job in their surgery, so we're not going to do anything about it. It's like, no, we need to have this discussion, because if they have that addressed and they're able to build upon that, think of how much better their practice can be.
Yeah.
Think of how much more they can motivate the rest of the team, and think of how much more efficient our work can be, and ultimately the care that we provide for the patient can be elevated immensely.
Mm-hmm.
So again, awareness, accountability, and open discussion, being open to criticism. Criticism can come with a lot of emotion. And again, emotion is a physical response. So
Mm-hmm.
a piece of that is like immediate that we're not even aware of. If you tell me that you're upset with me, I'm going to have some type of reaction before you explain why you're upset, or like the I guess intensity of those emotions you're feeling towards me, right?
Yeah, correct.
Mm.
Yeah, that feedback system is already working, and you got to be able to override that with your more logical kind of brain to be able to step back and say why.
Mm-hmm.
Why this emotion just came up, and I need to pair it with a reason. That's
Yeah.
developing more emotional intelligence. I've also felt that way, Blake. Like I always kind of feel like I'm an emotional person too, and the people that know me feel that way. But in our culture, especially like as young black men, young black athletic men, strong men, all these types of things, usually saying that you're emotional or saying that you're in tune with your emotions isn't a very popular way to see yourself or see
Yeah,
life.
yeah, and the topic of masculinity versus femininity, it has been, I guess, a lot more common as far as what I've seen in the media in the past couple of years, which I think is great, because there is like this macho expectation that comes with masculinity, not realizing that neglecting the femininity and having that balance between the two can turn into what you've referred to in the past as toxic masculinity, which really isn't masculine at all. That being too far off of that spectrum is not what a real man should be exemplifying in any way at any time.
Yeah.
So having that balance and being on the spectrum between the two is very important, because being what I consider to be a real man, a strong man, an influential man, a powerful man, does take being in touch with that emotional piece that may be considered to be more down towards the femininity side of that spectrum.
Yes.
But being strong in your thought process, and being strong in your decision making, and being understanding of yourself and the people around you, that's what makes a man. And being able to control a room in a way that's going to be a positive reflection, rather than you being intimidating and trying to belittle people and command your dominance in that way.
Yeah, and I believe that's why men are overpopulated, or there's more men in the prison system than women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a misunderstanding a lot of times of the emotions that we feel, and then the choices that we make. We think that we're being masculine. We think that we're showing a positive testosterone and being men by raising up and doing something that isn't aligning with our freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're talking about like true masculinity. You have to be free to express yourself. You have
Yeah.
to be free to
Yeah.
be able to grow and lead other people.
Mm-hmm.
So just understanding and being able to label those emotions is huge. I'm going to start off by just giving a quick definition of emotional intelligence.
Mm.
Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions as well as the emotions of others. Emotional intelligence is generally said to include a few skills, namely emotional awareness, or the ability to identify and name one's own emotions, the ability to harness those emotions and apply them to tasks like thinking and problem solving, and the ability to manage emotions, which include both regulating one's own emotions when necessary and helping others do the same.
Yeah, great. Awesome definition.
Mm-hmm.
Very important to recognize the significance of emotional intelligence, and really that is something that I think is sometimes the only thing holding people back from doing what they want to do or being the best version of themselves, because they're going around doing all these great things, but they have this lack of awareness and lack of understanding of what's going on inside of them. And sometimes we're performing these actions and accomplishing these tasks without really having much purpose behind them, and we don't recognize that there's something missing, and then that kind of subconscious emotional response of us being unfulfilled can manifest in a lot of different ways as well.
Mm.
So along with emotional intelligence, having a higher level of emotional intelligence gives us a better probability of not being emotionally unstable. Emotional instability is the opposite of emotional fortitude.
Mm,
So, have you ever experienced in your 26 years of life, going on 27,
facts.
an instance where you felt emotionally unstable?
Yes, definitely. I would say when I was younger and events were occurring that were just showing me, in our last podcast, you were talking about how when people don't feel like they have control,
Yeah.
that causes anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was younger and events started occurring, like family members passing away
Mm-hmm.
and things happening where I was just like, wow, this doesn't align with the perfect world that I feel like I should have. Life started to feel like it was speeding up, and pace has always been a big thing for me. So with sports, with basketball, if you're going at your own pace, you're going to most likely be in control. But a really good defender is going to try to speed you up.
Mm.
And if the game ever gets faster than what you're comfortable with, now you're out of control and you're going to be anxious and you're going to be all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt like life happened when I started to feel emotionally unstable. It was like I'm not at the same pace as life. It's speeding up faster than me and I'm just trying to grab on.
Yeah.
Now that was happening to me when I was around like 19, 20,
Mm-hmm.
younger. Like I'm saying, when these traumatic moments were happening and I had to cope and try to figure out ways to understand what was going on. Now, Blake, a big part of that was because I lacked the intelligence on how to describe how I was feeling.
Yeah.
They were new phenomena to me. I'm just like in my room, like, dang, this new emotion that's popping up. I don't know what to call it. I don't know how to process or cope with it. All I know is that it is controlling my inner being right now, and I feel unstable. So
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely had that in my life, and fortunately, I was able to use that adversity to grow a new shell, so to speak,
Right.
and get more powerful.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you for sharing that with
Mm-hmm.
us. I think that we've all probably been through that in our lives, unless maybe you're a younger listener. But everyone at some point in life goes through those life events, losing people, having failures, making mistakes, things that trigger emotional responses. And then, as you mentioned, it's that lack of understanding of what those emotions are, why they are happening, how we feel about them. Our emotions provoke feelings. Our feeling is how we process those emotions. So that's a great thing for you guys to think about, because me personally, of course I get upset, but when I get upset, I usually know why, and I can think of the process of me not being upset anymore. I don't want to be upset. So I'm actively making decisions to be what I consider to be happy and be content. So when it comes to positive emotions, there's a category of positive emotions, category of negative emotions, and then they kind of all play off of each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's high positive emotions, like being elated, like intense joy, just being so happy, and then there's just being content. It's a low level positive emotion, being content, being relaxed, being at peace. So a lot of people are always striving for those high positive emotions, but
Mm-hmm.
trying to maintain that deep end of the spectrum of emotions, and just constantly trying to avoid any ounce of negativity, that's draining. You can't maintain that for very long.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find a comfort zone within those low level positive emotions, so because eventually you are going to dip down, right? Again, the higher highs, the higher lows. So if you're maintaining in that lower level, you can go up into the high positivity range and then come back into that lower level of the positive emotions. But if you're hanging out in those high level of positive emotions, eventually it's not going to be genuine, and then you're gonna plummet, because that energy just can't be maintained at that level for long periods of time.
Yeah. What?
And that's something. Well, I was just going to say that's something that I had to come to terms with later in my life, around the same age period you're talking about, 19, 20, because I wanted to be happy, just as we all do, but I never wanted to be sad. I never wanted to have those low points, and that's not realistic. We just have to anticipate those and know how to come back out of those depths when we get there, because bad things happen, and you're going to have a natural emotional response to those bad things, such as losing loved ones. I lost my grandpa when I was 19 years old, the same same age period you're talking about. And I do think that that stimulated me into a time period where I wouldn't have considered myself to be emotionally stable. And it's difficult when you are becoming an adult, you're getting that independence, you're making these decisions, you're trying to do all the right things. And in the process, of course, you want to be happy. And then there's things just happening around you that you don't have control of. And then that lack of control manifests within us. And again, we don't process it properly, and it just snowballs into something that we are not even aware of. So being aware of those emotions, knowing why they're happening, knowing that they're temporary. And then again, like you said earlier, taking a step back, analyzing the situation, and again, refocusing on our goal in the big picture. That's always the process that you need to go through when you're experiencing these lows, because the lows are going to happen whether you like it or not. So us being understanding of each other, and knowing that people can have lows and not holding that against them, and encouraging people to come back up to the higher levels and those positive emotions is very important in developing relationships, and just creating a positive environment. Because if you want a positive environment, the people around you need to be operating in a similar way, because there's only so much battling you can do on a daily basis from the negativity. And if that's close within your bubble, that's again a lot of stress for you to try to maintain those positive emotions. That's constantly dragging and draining energy that's going to bring you into the depths and make it a lot harder to get back up to your baseline where you want to be.
Yeah, that's real. And as you were talking about the illustration of those higher highs and lower lows, it makes me think like a lot of people will try to use crutches in their life to maintain highs, like
Higher highs
substances.
and higher lows.
Correct. But you're talking about like the kind of unnatural way of how you can go like lower if you are not like actually finding a healthy way to go about that. And that's why I was trying to insert, like, that's how people would try to use substances to be happy, right? So they'll use a substance to create a higher high, and then it plummets into that like lowest low afterwards. And that's why if you're trying to have a natural progression towards like a better feeling, like you said, you have to focus on the goal, because our psychology has proven that our brains are goal-oriented organisms, right? So we get a release of dopamine and serotonin, those good feeling hormones, when we are working towards a goal. That has been with us as an evolutionary function to help us maintain our group and ourselves, and everybody, who's around us trying to survive. And now that we have survival seemingly down pack, and we can focus on greater things, you have to work towards a goal if you want to feel what you would say happy, or feel like you have some type of purpose in this world. Right.
And a lot of research is debatable, but when it comes to your emotions and the effect that it has on your body, that is undeniable, that negative emotions have negative effects on your physiology. And that comes, it stems from your thoughts, right? Because again, there's external factors that cause emotional responses that we're really not all in much control of. But when we think about those emotions and process those emotions and make an active effort to have positive reactions and have a positive processing experience, be able to grieve and get back to that baseline, that's going to avoid so much detriment when it comes to your body. It's interesting because even love has a similar response to fear and hatred when it comes to your actual body's response to it. The adrenaline when you see the person you love, and then that nervousness you may get. It's similar to when you're in a negative situation, right? But your mind is thinking of it differently. So that thought process that goes along with the physiological response is crucial in how it's actually going to affect your body and affect your mentality and your feelings after the fact.
Yeah. And, I always like to bring these conversations into the evolutionary psychology field, because it ends up making a lot of sense about why the physiological response is how it is, right? That's that parasympathetic nervous system. That's our fight or flight, right? So it's like when we're in these moments where it's uncertain, and is usually where our greatness will lie. You're talking about love, or if you're in a very a situation where you have to be great, like public speaking, or you have to perform in front of a lot of people, you're going to get this same primal feeling that comes from thousands of years of your ancestors coming through this world. And ultimately, all that means is that you're in a good place. You're in a place where your body feels like you need a little more oxygen and you need a little more support because you're in the moment. And that's beautiful, man, because if we try to avoid those times, then in my opinion, you're not going to feel as fulfilled.
Right, right. And being in the moment is so peaceful. And I was listening back to one of our conversations where you mentioned watching a wave ripple in the water. And the way that that wave moves is the same way that sound waves move, the same way you're hearing my voice right now, the same way light waves move and photons. All of that energy and the movement of that energy is almost exactly the same, maybe at different speeds, maybe at different levels of us being able to visualize or feel those waves moving. But that movement and the serenity behind it, we have to appreciate. So even this morning, I was being present in the moment by eating my breakfast outside, getting my sunlight, and watching the clouds move. That's something I used to do a lot when I was a kid. And if you think about how happy kids appear to be, you kind of have to take yourself back to that very simple way of thought and simple way of observation and just appreciating things as if you saw it for the first time. And I hadn't watched the clouds move in so long that it was very peaceful for me to do that. And establishing that peace at the beginning of your day is very important. Some people, quote unquote, will wake up on the wrong side of the bed. You wake up, you're stressed, you're running behind, you're rushing around, you don't get your breakfast, you don't drink any water, you run out the door, and your day's just in chaos. So getting to bed on time, getting up and making conscious decisions to establish that peace and acknowledge the beauty and the simplicity of the beauty of the things around us is going to be very beneficial in you understanding yourself and also just establishing that positive baseline.
Yeah. And then bringing it back to the waves phenomena that you were speaking of. When you take that time to tune yourself into that frequency that feels more simple and more peaceful, what you emit will reflect that frequency. So you hear our voice right now, but really what you're hearing is the work and dedication that I've put into tuning my soul, right?
Let them know.
It's like if I go to a mountaintop, sit and meditate, then I descend to bring back to my family and my friends and my coworkers, right? But I have to go to the mountaintop and do my meditations. So then when I descend, y'all could feel me. You know what I'm saying? And this is one way that I've learned to unlock more avenues in my life and to be able to be there for others that feel more constricted.
Right. And that's Mother Nature working.
Man.
And she's strong. She's strong. You mentioned symmetry and reflection. That is a staple of nature. When you look at a flower, the symmetry of a flower, the reflection within water, we look at a mirror and think of a man-made item, the mirror, me being able to see my reflection. The reflection was there before, and people were infatuated by the reflection, but you want a positive reflection, right? You don't want to look in the mirror if it's something you don't want to see, if it's a negative image. And so you need to have that self-confidence and that self-love to determine what that image is going to be, because that image isn't going to change. You can get plastic surgery, you can do whatever alterations you want to do to the external, but you looking yourself in the eye in that mirror, you can't change the soul that you're staring into, right? And that reflection you need to be aware of, because other people are going to look into your eyes and have that same reflection and have that same experience. And they're going to see into you what you see into yourself.
Man, that's so true, right?
They are going to see into you what you see in yourself.
Man.
So what are you going to establish within you? Right? Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be negative? Are you going to love yourself? You're going to be negative in your image and always be belittling yourself. And again, we talked earlier in a previous conversation about the positive reinforcement we can establish, right? You don't look in the mirror and say, you're not good enough, you need to get better. You look at yourself in the mirror and say, you've been doing great, but you can do better. You're capable. But you have to give yourself credit and be appreciative of the journey that you've already walked, because that in itself is an accomplishment, whether you like it or not, whether you're satisfied with your current situation. You got to look yourself in the mirror and give yourself a pat on the back, because so many people were unable to get to this point that you're at, whether it was external factors, unfortunate circumstances, or them not putting in the effort, or all of the above. You're here right now, and so many other people did not accomplish what you accomplished, regardless of what it is. And we're constantly comparing ourselves to people that are on the long end of the spectrum in terms of success and accomplishment and goals. But we have to keep it in perspective that there are 8 billion people on this earth.
Yeah.
And whatever you want to compare, you're not at the bottom of the totem pole on anything. You might not be even close to the top, but that's okay. You got time, God willing. But we have to be appreciative of what we've done and what we have an opportunity to do. And that appreciation, that gratitude, that understanding, that awareness is really the key to enlightenment and being calm and content. And a lot of people aren't really able to tap into that level of understanding, and fear and anxiety is just a lack of understanding, whatever you want to relate that topic to.
So self-talk. So do you, Blake, what do you feel like self-talk is, and how does it help you in your day-to-day?
Self-talk's that little voice in your head. We all got it. It's our thoughts. We all talk to ourselves. I used to think people were crazy for talking to themselves. It might look crazy to talk to yourself out loud, but we all talk to ourselves in our heads. And so we talk to ourselves through that voice, and you can either say nice things to yourself or say mean things to yourself. And I'm sure we can all admit to being, negative towards ourselves in that self-talk at some point in our lives. But I want you guys to think about what was the end result when you talk to yourself in that way. And just also think about what would have been different if you had been positive towards yourself and been uplifting. That self-talk is your self-motivation. That self-talk is, in a positive way, going to be stimulated in the form of self-love. All of those are intertwined into the same concept. So self-talk has so much power because, again, that's what's going to give you the opportunity to have more control of your emotional responses and your subsequent feelings. Again, there's a piece of emotions that we cannot control, but if you have that processing power after the fact, when that initial response is activated through self-talk, you can really, really control a lot of what you're going to experience. Me personally, again, we think to the positive reinforcement, the positive motivation, and how that's sometimes not established in the sports environment. I had to really develop positive self-talk habits after I was done being an athlete. And now in hindsight, that may have been something that prevented me from reaching my full potential, not having that positive self-talk versus me telling myself that I wasn't fast enough, wasn't strong enough, so this is what I need to do, rather than saying, I'm proud of myself for being where I am now, and I've worked so hard, but I know I can work harder and I know I can achieve more. That small alteration in how you project that thought is so powerful in how you're going to accomplish the goal that you're thinking of in relation to the thought.
Yeah, 100%. I believe that tuning your self-talk is the biggest thing for you to be successful, right? All the greats talk about this, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. And one thing that is necessary is to understand that before you have worked towards mastery of self-talk, you're going to feel that fear. And fear is just such a normal phenomena for a human being. You got to think about it. We're not apex predators. We're somewhere around the middle of the food chain, if you think about all the animals that live on Earth. So, of course, we're going to have some fear because we're not at the top, but we have consciousness. So that means that we can redirect our fear, right? The art that we create, or this platform that we have, is trying to combat fear. That's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to expose myself. Like you're saying, I'm trying to be vulnerable and then put it out here. So my cousins, my mom, my friends, everyone can see me facing fear, right? So you talk about self-talk in athletics. A lot of people will ask me like, oh, you are a basketball official. how does it feel when a whole crowd is yelling at you, cussing at you, saying slurs, coaches yelling at you, players in a moment that's super high emotional, and they'll be like, I could not deal with that. Thousands of people screaming at me. And my answer is, well, I've worked towards mastering my self-talk. So not only do I tell myself, if I have a moment, breathe. That's my first thing. If I'm sitting there and I have a moment that I don't have to be working and everything's emotional, my first step is to breathe. Because if I take a conscious breath, it tells my body that I'm not in danger.
And you're in control.
Exactly. If I was in danger, think back to evolutionary psychology. If a lion is chasing me, I do not have time to sit there and take a conscious breath. If I take a conscious breath, I'm telling my body, hey, I'm in control and I'm chilling.
Yes.
So that's my number one. And then second thing for self-talk to me is back to my fundamentals. What am I looking for? I'm not going to get into like the science of basketball officiating, but what am I looking for? What is my job? What is my perspective from where I'm standing? Right? So these are ways that I use self-talk to get myself back into the moment when I'm in a high emotional situation with a whole crowd.
And a lot of that comes through observation and, learning from experience. You've officiated, would you say hundreds or thousands of games?
Thousands
of
I
games.
mean, almost 5 years now, starting when I was 2021. So not year 2021 when I was 20 years old. Yeah.
So the power in that repetition, learning from the experiences that you've had, learning from other people's experiences, because Russ has a mentor. Russ observes other officials, see how they operate, see what they do wrong, see what they do well, uses that to his advantage to incorporate into his practice. I do the same in the hospital setting, observing other nurses, other doctors, other healthcare professionals, physical therapists, respiratory therapists, how they interact with the patients, how they interact with the families, how they accomplish their tasks, and how they organize their day. All of those things are constantly kind of being downloaded into my consciousness so I can try to develop my own style. And I do feel like my style of interaction with people is like really high on the I guess the totem pole of comparison, when you would say in regards to, emotional intelligence and establishing that environment of trust and honesty, just because I've seen people's reactions to negative input and how that can kind of tarnish the potential of what we're trying to accomplish. If people are fighting against each other in a stressful situation, or we can't come to an agreement on how we're going to at least try to solve an issue, that wastes a lot of time and diminishes efficiency. So I've seen, again, doctors snap at people. I've seen family members get very emotional and aggressive in certain situations, and I have to take a step back and understand why that's happening, but also realize that I can prevent that from, leaking into my own consciousness and leaking into how I'm going to perform in this situation. And that level of awareness has done me so much justice, because I've been in rooms where every single person in that room is at a higher stress level than I am. And it's almost like things are slowing down, and it's almost quieter in my little bubble than it really is in that room, just because, again, I'm breathing. I have a mask on all the time at work.
Yeah.
So I'm very conscious about my breathing. And I've seen bad things happen and kind of held my breath in that moment. And I can feel that spike of adrenaline, and you kind of get those palpitations for a second.
Yeah.
But when I see something happen and I breathe before I get into that situation and try to address it, it helps me throughout the rest of that situation. So again, establishing that baseline of being content and at peace and relaxed before you act upon anything. And that's taking us back to how I talked about preferring to start my day, establishing that baseline of being at peace and appreciating something very simple in that moment before I go tackle all of the difficulties of the day. That's going to just put me at an advantage at every single turn that I come to in my life. So that's something that, early in my career, obviously I wasn't aware of. So there's a code situation, I'm diving in, adrenaline's high, and I think that adrenaline's going to allow me to do what I need to do. But that's how you make mistakes, when you don't take that little split second to establish what's going on. And one way that I've been able to recognize that in observing other people is that certain doctors will, arrive to a scene where CPR is being provided and people are waiting on them to make a decision of if we need to defibrillate someone or give a certain medication. And the doctor is so calm that they almost look disinterested. And then people are looking at them like, what? They're like kind of anxious, waiting for them to make a decision because they're like, hurry up, we want you to tell us. But they're trying to make sure they make the best decision possible. And sometimes that can't be done immediately. We repeat things and we have that repetition so that we can have more of an automatic process in how we do respond to certain situations. But these doctors' minds are so great that they can realize that the factors are always going to be a little bit different. So the presentation may be similar at face value of something they've seen before, but this individual patient is this individual and they're different from all the other patients you've seen, even if the disease process they're experiencing is very similar. So you have to take all those things into consideration when you're making those decisions, and being calm in that process is so powerful, and it ultimately commands that respect in return, because you finally make the decision, it's the right decision, everybody's doing well after the fact, and then they look back at it and they think that you were calm and collected when really inside you're kind of stirring because your gears are turning and you're trying to process it, but you can't let that manifest into this external anxiety and frantic presentation, because then one, the people watching you and waiting for you to make a decision are not going to be comforted in the decision that you finally make.
Yeah.
And two, you're going to be anxious and finally saying that decision, and then if you're anxious in the process, you're most likely not going to make the best decision possible.
For
So
sure.
having that decision making process is so essential, and that's why the highest paid people of the world are essentially just getting paid to make decisions, because that's a very valuable skill to have that a lot of people are not able to optimize.
Mm-hmm. And that breath is always going to be a tool, right? I like how you said that, you kind of have forgot sometimes in the early times before you're mastering this calm decision-making ability, sometimes you forget to breathe, and that just intensifies the anxiety. And it's interesting. I kind of want to veer off into a more historical approach for this, just because this is going to be a February release. This is Black History Month, and I don't want to try to take away from our large scope, but I want to just think about the fact that we've already talked about how your personality and some of your brain functions can be genetic, right? Now, here in America, when we talk about Black history, we do have to reckon with the fact that only, a couple hundred years ago, there was slavery, there was intense anxiety and depression that were felt by a lot of people's ancestors. And in the civil rights era, right, like the 1960s, you had a lot of leaders that were trying to talk about the knowledge of self, right? And they would kind of say that this is the key to be able to turn people who had just come out of slavery back into functioning and spiritual, beautiful beings. And all that knowledge of self was trying to do was get you to recognize how your bodily physiological functions worked with your mind and your identity and your computing skills, right? Because it took that level of analysis to be able to turn these people like back into the human beings that they were supposed to be, right? Before they were labeled as less than 3/5 inhuman property cattle. Before they were labeled that, they were able to breathe and understand how they were intertwined with this world and this environment. So the only reason I'm saying this is because if you think about Black History Month, it's like, how did people go from being labeled as cattle to people who we now see who are like Barack Obama and Jay-Z and all these amazing people who are very intelligent and spiritual? Well, that came from realizing things like breathing, things like my image. You talked about what is my image when I look at myself in the mirror. My dad, my whole life, has always told me, like, in the morning, look in the mirror objectively. If you're not vibing with that, you got to make changes. Some of the most important things that I know, right? So this is all just the knowledge of self. And one thing I've learned is that if you really focus on that knowledge of self and take your inner being as something that you can master, it just makes a whole new experience in this world.
Yeah, and that again stems from the self-talk piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that you said look in the mirror and be objective,
Mm-hmm.
because for those of you that don't know, objective information comes from data and there's no opinion involved. Subjective information is our opinion, how we feel about something, and it's our personal twist on what's actually happening there. So you remove your emotion and your opinion from that image in the mirror, and then you tell yourself some positive things because you deserve to hear those positive things, right? And that's you taking control of the situation. And if you say positive things to yourself, people will say positive things back to you. And that's just how the way of the world works. But if you look in that mirror and you're disgusted or you're dissatisfied or you're sad and you just don't like what you're seeing and you don't like what you're doing, then nobody else is going to like what they're looking at and what they're doing either. It's that simple. And so that brings me to this topic. You referred to highly successful athletes and their self-image and their process of self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
What's your perspective on the label of being cocky, and why is a cocky mentality possibly beneficial, and how do we avoid getting into what is actually cockiness and focus on developing a high level of self-positivity and self-love?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do think that when you're cocky, it's basically that you are showing a supreme confidence. And a lot of people aren't going to like that because they don't feel that same way in themselves. Now, I think that it becomes to be too much. So last episode, I talked about the Tower of Babel, the phenomena of how these people came together speaking the same tongue. They built up a tower. And in the story of the Bible, God breaks it down because they were trying to unify to understand. Well, another part of that story is that they were trying to take credit for building that tower and gave no credit to God for their ability to even be able to build the tower.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's good to be supreme confident, but in my belief, you have to give credit to God for what you have. So I think that cockiness becomes too much when you think that it's 100% your facilities that are contributing your success.
Yeah. The egocentrism that comes behind thinking that, the world revolves around me. Everything I have is because of me. Nobody's helped me get here. And, I've mentioned on a couple of our other conversations the idea of it being lonely at the top. And it's like, well, so many people helped you get to where you are. God first and foremost, not a person, but without God, without your parents, without the community that has helped you get to where you are, where would you be? You got to be honest about that. And that takes me to the honesty of our emotions. I feel like a lot of people that come off as cocky are not genuine in how they really think about themselves. They're too caught up on projecting that I'm confident, and really there's something inside that's lacking that is causing them to overcompensate.
Yeah.
I think that cockiness is the overcompensation of confidence. And then you'll hear a cocky person say, oh, I'm not cocky, I'm confident. Well, there's similarities between the two. But again, everything lies upon a spectrum. And being too confident is being stupid.
Yeah. So that's a great way to put it, because it makes me think that when you're confident, you understand the trials and tribulations that can come to you. But when you're cocky, those moments humble you way harder because you are not prepared. That's kind of like the story of like Moses with the flood. You could imagine if Moses got the information that a flood was going to come, and then he built an ark up and was like, yeah, I built an ark. I thought about this. This is me. Then he would have been humbled so much quicker rather than giving that glory to, oh my gosh, I was given some information and I prepared. Now this adversity that's coming, I'm going to float over.
Yeah. That humility is so powerful. And I try to teach that to these young athletes because I was at a 7-on-7 tournament yesterday. I haven't been to a 7-on-7 tournament in years, and it is completely different.
I just realized that I said Moses. I meant Noah.
Oh, yeah.
It's Noah's Ark. I said Moses.
I think everybody knew what you meant.
Yeah, but go ahead.
But just the culture of this, I would say, cockiness. I was like, all these kids are cocky now. I showed up wearing my Pit Vipers. I rock Pit Vipers all the time. All these kids rocking Pit Vipers in the game, wearing beanies, wearing pajama pants, have professional camera people on the sidelines celebrating after every play, even if they didn't do anything. Like, it's just an interesting culture to me. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of is unsettling to think that humility and being humble as an athlete is being kind of vaporized from our society. That's not the way to go anymore, because if you're being humble, it looks boring on camera. And there's
Mm-hmm.
cameras everywhere. And you don't want people taking pictures of you looking boring, right? I
Right.
think that's what it's coming down to.
For sure.
But these kids clearly are getting so away from the game. And you talk about it in terms of basketball. I hadn't
Mm-hmm.
really seen it up and close like this in football before, because it's different watching a football game. People are padded up, have helmets on. There's so much structure. But these 7-on-7s now, they're kind of like a little show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everybody's face to face, like they're talking crap.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't really ride with it. I was kind of disappointed with how the culture is in terms of that, if I got to be honest. But
Yeah.
having the awareness for parents to pull their kids back a second and be like, you know what, you got to calm it down a little. Like, be humble. Like, yeah, that was a good play, but you don't need to be addressing the other sideline, pointing at people, laughing, and making these little smart comments when you're walking by. Like, that's awful sportsmanship.
Yeah.
It's not necessary, and it's not helping your game. You think that you're getting in their heads and making them not perform as well, but you're just being distracted from your task that's at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's funny because I was sitting next to this guy, and his son was really good. And his son had this really nice touchdown catch, one-handed catch, and he's like, yeah, that's me, that's me. I was like, okay, yeah, he's hyped, that's cool. But then it's like the end of the game, and he comes up on this another opportunity for a touchdown, and he purposefully tries to catch it one-handed again.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I'm talking to his dad, like, the fundamentals are so crucial.
Yeah.
And his dad, he wasn't like offended by the conversation we were having or anything, which was cool to me, because I know parents can get kind of uptight and defensive when you talk about like their kids and how they're performing. But he was
Mm-hmm.
understanding. He's like, yeah, he's gonna learn one day that all that one-handed crap isn't necessary, and it's gonna hold him back. And I was like, yeah, but he's good. He's doing his thing. Hopefully he learns that soon. This kid's only a freshman, so there's so
Yeah.
much time to develop. And time's a relative term, because really 3 years in the grand scheme, if you plan on going to the league or something, it's not that much time to
Mm-hmm.
develop qualities like that. Those are things that need to be established early on if you're really going to take advantage of them and allow them to elevate your game. But missing out on opportunities for scoring or opportunities for anything as a result of you trying to be flashy or being cocky or feeling like you're invincible is going to be at a detriment to your success. And regardless of what area we're talking about, whether it's sports or education or your professional life, you have to have some humility in your actions, but also be proud of yourself. So that's the balance there, right?
Yeah.
Because you need pride, you need self-love, you need the positive image,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, you have to realize that there's a lot of other impressive people around here too, and I have to keep working hard if I don't want them to surpass me. And me being complacent and thinking that I'm the best thing that's ever been born is going to hurt me in the long run.
Yeah.
But with that being said, there is almost this requirement of having some level of that image, because you think of like LeBron or Kobe, and they
Sure.
always project like they are the best player.
Sure.
Because they want to be the best player. They believe they're the best player. So it's their goal to show that they're the best player.
Yeah.
But the difference is actually putting in that work.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say too.
Right. Because a lot of these kids, they project the image and they have the self-talk, but they're not actually following the steps and doing the work.
Correct.
Because what you're doing when the lights are off and when there's no cameras and there's nobody around to watch you, that's what's really going to make you the top dog. That's
For
what's
sure.
going to put you ahead of everyone else.
Yep.
And it's hard to have that same intensity and that same mentality when there aren't other people around you giving you that external motivation.
Yep.
And that's what I mentioned on one of our previous conversations, where I think it's hard for people to focus on one task, one goal. I'm going to be the best at this and dedicate my life to it. And regardless of what other people think or say about my approach, I'm confident in my actions because I want to be the best and this is what it takes. That's very difficult for a lot of people to do because we're used to everyone cheering when I make a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
All my teammates pat me on the back when I do something big.
Mm-hmm.
My parents over there giving me a reward after I do something. But if you're not able to go to the gym on your own and work out and make sure that you're going to eat your meals and make sure you're going to drink your water, nobody's going to hold your hand and make sure you're doing all those things. And nobody's going to celebrate you when you do those things either. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to be aware of that and realize that the celebration and the glory really has little significance when it comes to the process of you accomplishing these big goals.
Correct. And I'm glad that you mentioned that Kobe and LeBron, they were able to have that level because of the work they put in. So I like to think about this as if I'm always in an empty gym putting in work and the game tips off at 6 o'clock, the only difference between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. is now there's people in the gym. Right. And when they leave, I'm still putting in work. So it's when you are actually dedicated to your goal and your grind, the external factors of spectators and time being on the clock means nothing. Right. So a lot of these kids that are flashy and like to celebrate all the time, it's because when they're in the game, that is their highest goal. They're like, okay, I scored in front of everybody. This is what I do. Kobe's like, I've been doing this all day anyway. The crowd came in, but my actual mastery is in this skill.
Yeah.
Right. And that's been one of my biggest things is that I understand an empty gym. Right. So when I see a gym fill up, it's cool. But in my mind, I'm like, I've been here so much when that light was off, that hoop was up, and it was just me and that hoop down and my music playing.
Yeah.
You know, and when you understand the silence, you understand the simplicity, then as it gets more complicated, you're much more under control. That's a very deeper concept when we talk about psychological health, because I also sit in my room and meditate, and that's almost like my silent gym of my mind. So then now when I go in the world and external factors are acting upon me, I know what it's like to be in simplicity.
Yeah. You can say, I've been here before. You know,
I live here.
Yeah, I live here.
I live
it's all
here.
about repetition and being familiar with those situations. But if you're not familiar with peace, you're not familiar with quiet, you're not familiar with being alone, then all of those things are going to feel foreign and feel scary. But we shouldn't be afraid of being alone or at peace. You know, I've talked to people that say, I can't meditate. I can't sit there in silence. My mind is just racing. And hearing that from someone makes me anxious because I'm like, oh man, I can't even imagine being in that place in my life to where I can't just sit and enjoy silence for 1 minute. 1 minute. You know, people think I have to meditate for an hour. You can meditate for 10 seconds, right? Whatever you have the opportunity to do. And that's why we say, like, whatever you want to do with your time, you can do. People say, I don't have time. You do have time. I know some people listening to this might have 5, 6 kids and 2 jobs, but there is a point in the day where you could meditate for a period of time. It might not be as long as you want, but it's there. You just have to make the opportunities.
Yeah.
And then so it's interesting, you know, in relation to the topic of meditation, I've seen some research with exercise, making time for exercise. People are like, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym. Oh, I don't have 30 minutes in my day I can do a workout. But there's actually research that shows like micro dosing your exercise is beneficial. If you're doing 20 seconds of exercise 5 times a day, that's better than not doing anything. So that's as much as taking the stairs at work, right? And we overestimate, or I guess underestimate, the benefit of making conscious decisions like that. Because I work on the 2nd floor at the hospital. So if I'm in a rush, you know, okay, my previous thought, if I'm in a rush, I'm going to hop on the elevator. But it's technically faster for me to get on the stairs and go up 1 flight of stairs. But I've gotten to work now where I'm like, okay, I'm just run up these stairs real quick. And I see people waiting at the elevator where the stairs are right next to the elevator.
Yeah.
Small conscious decisions that, you know, that's me getting a little bit of exercise in the day. That's going to keep me from having heart disease in later in my life. That's going to keep me from developing Alzheimer's later in my life. And you could sit here and be like, Blake, that's a little dramatic, because that's just 1 flight of stairs. But I'm making that decision every single shift more than once a shift, every single week, every single month for several years, those add up. All those little decisions that you make on a daily basis add up.
Man.
If you're going to sit and watch Netflix to start your day every morning for an hour, that's 365 hours out of your year that you started your day that way, rather than getting your nutrition, meditating, reading, getting sunlight, water, and making those positive, conscious decisions that you know are going to benefit you physically, mentally, spiritually.
Yeah.
And we make so many decisions on a daily basis. We talked about this on one of our previous discussions as well. Decision making and decision fatigue.
Yeah.
We make so many decisions that it often is tiring. So when you have a routine, it makes those decisions a little bit easier, and having an understanding of why you're making those decisions and when you're going to make certain decisions. Automating some of those processes are going to benefit you and having more of a peace of mind, but you have to just make sure you're not being complacent in the process and going on autopilot. You have to make sure you're being grateful for those opportunities, because I can't do my routine the way that I want to every single day. Yeah. So when I'm able to, I appreciate it. I acknowledge the blessing of being able to do what I want to do, how I want to do it, and also think about why I'm doing it that way.
Mm-hmm. And you owe it to yourself. I want to give a quick shout out to my man, Sam Ulrich. I know he's listening. It's one of my homies that I played college basketball with. You know, we used to have a lot of conversations, and we kind of boiled it down to like, dude, we make the choice to live every day. Like, it's not like anyone's forcing you to do this, but you're making the choice to show up. You brought up the person with 5 or 6 kids and 2 jobs. You're making the choice to do this. So you owe it to yourself to kind of put some utilities into your tool belt that are going to help you organize and maximize your efficiency with the people you're leading.
Yeah. And that's why, again, I want everyone listening to this to just be proud of yourself. Proud of yourself for listening to this podcast, because at this point, if you've listened to previous episodes, I'm assuming you're listening to this because you're gaining something and you want to better yourself and you want to see how we grow and you want to grow with us. And that's good for you. I hope you get what you want out of this. And if you don't, maybe you will next week. But you are making conscious decisions to better your life. You're making conscious decisions to put positivity into your body, into your ears, into your consciousness, so that you can have that positive self-talk and have those positive habits. I think that listening to us talk about these things is developing a positive habit, whether or not you continue to do so or use this same type of stimulus in a different fashion. What I would like for people to be aware of is that, like you said, the conversations with Sam, you know, our conversations with one another are so vital to our progress and what we accomplish ever. And so people that are really seclusive and don't want to be interactive with one another and don't have that understanding of the average person because they don't like interacting with people, they're always going to be at a disadvantage. We have to force ourselves to have these emotional experiences with one another, because if you get caught in your own emotions, you might get to the point where you don't want to make the decision to live on a daily basis.
Exactly.
I think that's getting too caught up in what's going on in here, and not being aware and appreciative of what's going on around us. And again, that's why I want everyone listening to this to be proud of yourself, because you made a decision to wake up this morning and start doing things. People don't always do things. Some people wake up and stay in bed for 8 hours, right? And we know the detriment that comes behind that physically and mentally. Not getting up, moving around, not seeing the sunlight, not doing anything is not good, right? Getting in that bad, toxic habit of only being comfortable. And so it's not comfortable waking up in the morning all the time. If you slept right and you got a nice mattress and your health and your nutrient intake is optimal, then maybe getting up is nice. But most of the time for me, it's hard to get up in the morning. But I do it. And so you not hitting snooze and getting up and starting your day, you should be proud of yourself for that, because some people didn't do that. And it just sounds crazy to reward ourselves for such simple tasks. But if you do that, then you spend the whole day applauding yourself, right?
Yep.
Because I
Yep.
opened up my laptop and I started researching today. Good for me. Did I learn
Hmm.
anything significant? Maybe not, but I tried to.
Yeah. And
So
I
what am I
treated
going to do?
myself, right? I treated myself like I matter, and I treated myself like what I'm putting in my life matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. I know you've said this multiple times on this podcast. Comfort is a drug. And
Mm.
we as leaders and we as people who are trying to do better, we got to get off that drug. Yeah, and sometimes to get off that drug, it takes discipline and delayed gratification. So to you, Blake, what do you think it means to delay gratification? I feel like that has a lot to do with understanding yourself and being able to have more awareness.
Um, Delayed gratification is it's a result of trusting the process,
Mm,
looking at the big picture and being appreciative of the steps it takes to get to a goal that you're reaching towards, and understanding that when things happen quickly, they usually don't last very long.
mm-hmm,
And there's a lot of benefit to the processes that lead up to a lot of the things that we want. For instance, in education, you want to know how to do something. As you're learning the steps to know whatever it is you're trying to learn, whether it's fix up a car or paint a wall, even, those steps are going to teach you small things along the way that are greater than that end goal.
mm-hmm,
So me learning to run properly is going to prevent me from having injury, right?
mm-hmm.
But if my mind is just focused on running fast, then I'm not going to run properly and I'm increasing my chances of getting injured. So we have to understand all of the factors that go into developing what we want to be the end result. And
Mm-hmm.
that end result should be delayed to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in a society now where we see people with a lot of things, material items, living lives that we think they're living. That's what they're portraying. And we don't know the process that went into getting to that point. So in our minds, we think they woke up one day and had it. And in our minds, we're like, I want to wake up one day and have all that too.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were to actually write down every single step and every single minute and emotion and task that they had to do to get to that point, a lot of people would get turned off from even wanting the final goal. But we can't see that process. We see the final goal and we see it looks real pretty.
Yeah.
But the people that get to that final goal and are content at that final goal are the folks that appreciate the process and allow for the delayed gratification. Because a lot of people that have financial success will admit that when they made their first large financial goal, they were dissatisfied once they got there because
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't what they expected.
Yep.
And then, of course, once you reach that goal, you want the next step, and they couldn't find the appreciation in actually getting to that goal because they neglected the process that came before it.
For sure, because the journey is the feedback system, right? At the beginning of this, we're talking about how dopamine and serotonin is released when you're doing goal-oriented behaviors, right? So the end result can't be where you find your value. I heard Mos Def say in an interview that if you think money and prestige is going to be your goal, then you're going to find yourself on top of a plastic mountain crying real tears. And I was like, man, that's some facts right there, because that's genuinely what it will be. If you think your destination is where you're going to find yourself at, then you're missing the fact that you're in the moment. You're now, right? Shout out to my man KJ who created this brand, Never Off Work, because this is much more implications than meaning that I work 15 hours a day. No, what this means is every moment of my life, I'm working towards building myself, whether that is my studies and meditation, or it's the work I'm doing, or my relationships with my family and friends. I'm always working towards my mastery and towards my self-actualization.
Yeah. And I like that you say that. And I like you're wearing that shirt because for some people, it sounds exhausting to be working all the time, right? But you have to separate the enjoyable work of yourself and then work, us trying to pay the bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't identify with our profession. We don't identify with that work. We identify with ourselves and who we are as people, and we enjoy developing ourselves. We get that dopamine release as we take those steps. The dopamine release isn't when we get the goal. We're getting dopamine releases on the way up. And some people don't enjoy the process. So it's not a happy experience putting in that work
Yep.
because you don't understand the gravity of those actions that are taking place along the way. So to be aware of that and put yourself in a place where you're eager to work towards your goals and you're eager to make small steps towards what it is you ultimately want rather than being so eager to be done with the process. A lot of us want, oh, I hope this is over soon so I can get to where I want to go. Like I want to speed up this trap. I want to go 150 miles down per hour down the highway rather than going the speed limit and enjoying the scenery along the way and stopping to smell the flowers, as they say, being appreciative that all of the things that you're experiencing along that path aren't going to happen again. You're going to experience it once. You might experience variations of that, but everything happens one time.
Yeah. I had somebody the other day, they asked me they were like, man, I watched the Super Bowl or the March Madness NCAA tournament, and there's always players who are crying. And they were like, why are all these grown men, these super masculine men, just bawling at the end of these games? And I'm like, well, the end of that moment represents the fact that this whole thing is fleeting. If you've ever been in that moment where you lost in a playoff game or you won, sometimes it hits you that, whoa, I'm not putting this jersey back on. Like, whoa, I'm not even lacing these shoes and hooping with these people I care about anymore. And it becomes a much greater thing. It's more than your sport. It's like this primal feeling of this whole thing is fleeting. This whole thing is over as soon as it starts. So then it really reorients you back into the place, or it should reorient you back into the place of, okay, the only thing I truly have is my moment and what I'm doing day to day.
Yep.
Right.
And the same concept can be attributed to going through an injury, right? Because all of a sudden, boom, I might not be able to ever play again. And that's hard to deal with. And we don't always think about, after I win that Super Bowl, that might be the last game I ever play. It's at that moment that it's over. You have this overwhelming realization, almost epiphany of, oh, wow, all of that stuff I did before, that's in the past. I don't get to redo that. And that's what we try to help young athletes realize. Whether you're in middle school, high school, whatever, this period of your athletic journey is so temporary and you have to enjoy it while it's here. Of course, you want a D1 scholarship. Of course, you want to make all of these, break records and have all these accolades, but you just being in your amateur state, you don't get to do this again. You don't get to build up to that level again. You have to enjoy that process, or else you're going to be very dissatisfied when you finally get to what it is you're aspiring to be.
For sure. And I mean, our generation had the biggest example ever, bro, because I watched Kobe from the time he was drafted in 96. I was born in 96. So I watched Kobe from the time I was able to consciously realize what I was doing. And I quickly realized this dude is a different breed, right? Watched him develop skill, watch him win championships, hit game winners over the Phoenix Suns that were right down the street. And I'm applauding for that. My family's upset at me because they all have Suns jerseys on and I'm repping Kobe hard, right? I went through all of that. And then there was a day where I get a notification saying that he's passed away from a helicopter crash. I'm sitting here like, this can't be a better example of why we got to absorb what we love and what we're doing day to day, because it's fleeting. It's ephemeral. If you are a Bible reader and you turn to Ecclesiastes, you're going to see that wisdom of Solomon, right? It is all ephemeral. It is all fleeting. All you really have is your day-to-day work and, in my opinion, your connection with God.
And then, we have these, again, innate emotional responses when we're met with certain stimuli. So hearing that about Kobe and the helicopter crash, it always puts a little damper on my mood. I'm like, dang, that really happened. Sometimes it's hard for me to accept and understand. I never met Kobe. I never saw Kobe in person. Russ saw Kobe in person before. Did you ever speak to him?
Dude, yeah, I talked to him. I met him, conversation, worked with him, got the blessing to be able to work and referee his daughter and their whole team. RIP to all of them. And, that was very surreal for me. And so,
we all have some level of emotional response when we think about Kobe, whether we've actually interacted with him or not. And to be able to still use his name as inspiration is very, very powerful and very important, because we can't be sad forever, right?
Mhm.
We can't go back and relive those experiences, watching Kobe drop 70 points or watching him win 5 titles. Was it 5?
Mhm.
And yeah, we just have to be appreciative of those things when they happen, because we look at athletes, we look at musicians, we look at artists that we can think of, Michael Jackson, Banksy, those type of people. When they're gone, all of a sudden that value is through the roof,
Yeah.
where nothing's changed about what they did. We just weren't appreciating it while it was happening.
Mhm.
And now that it can't happen again, and we know for a fact it can't happen again, all of a sudden we're so appreciative and it's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
But if we could just recognize the beauty in the things that are happening as they happen, life is so much more enjoyable and so much more bearable, because negative is a lot easier to focus on than positive. It takes a conscious effort to address the negative and push it aside,
Mhm.
and then address the positive and keep it here, and help it flourish and help it be noticed by everyone else. And I really try to remove myself from my life at least a little bit each day, whether it's me, driving and really focusing on the colors of the other cars around me, or me standing outside and looking at the sky again, like seeing the clouds move. Some people don't even think about the fact that the clouds are moving.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
like, oh, there's a cloud. But like that's a large energy source just floating across the sky. And it's painting a picture there for your eyes. And it is so cool to just think about all the things we used to do as a kid again, because it's kind of enlightening in us trying to maintain happiness and optimize our lives. Because I remember laying in the grass watching the clouds and trying to think of what that cloud looked like, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that we don't do as adults. We don't appreciate those images. We don't appreciate those facts of nature that are staring at us on a daily basis, floating above us, and really shaping everything that we do. And we just ignore it. We get caught in this cycle. We're on autopilot, and we're
Yeah.
not able to recognize the beauty of the potential that is within us, and the potential of the things around us. And that understanding that potential is what's going to allow you to be in a place where we can more so have that delayed gratification, and not be disappointed that the gratification is delayed, but be appreciative that we were able to go along this process and get to that point, and let that point be more meaningful.
Yeah, and a lot of people use that word enlightenment, and that's truly all it is noticing that this energy that is in the moment, you can tap into it, right? When you're taken away with your mind on the past and the future, you're not in the moment. But when you're here and you're recognizing that energy of everything that's around you, you're in a state of enlightenment. You said that the energy is potential, but when you focus yourself in the moment and tap into that energy, now it's kinetic, because it's going to flow through you and recharge you, right? So you're able to use the clouds, the trees, the sunlight. You're able to use grounding yourself in some grass and being around just the energy of the world to recharge you, because like we were saying on previous episodes, you are an extension of this world. So welcome.
Welcome. And we are all connected, whether you like it or not. So you're going to have to find a way to embrace that if you really want to operate at a optimal level and not have so much negative external effect on your life. I want to give a little example of a patient I took care of just a couple weeks ago. The gentleman was in a lot of discomfort, having gastrointestinal issues. So, that can be enough for anybody to be grumpy, in my opinion. But this is a gentleman who admitted that he's difficult to deal with, that he's a grumpy person, that he's a negative person. These are all things that he told me, and these are things that the other nurses told me. But that didn't change how I interacted with him. And I used that to my advantage to see what would be the optimal way to interact with this man for him to have the best experience he could possibly have in this hospital. And as I was thinking of that and going on with the day, giving his medications, doing procedures or whatnot, you know, his how he interacted with me did not change. I felt like I wasn't breaking through to him, and that's hard to deal with because you almost feel like you're not doing a good job. But then in the afternoon, I came into the room and he calls in my supervisor, and I'm like, oh God, like what is he going to complain about, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then he's like, I just want to let you know that Blake has, you know, been the most professional and helpful nurse that I've experienced at this hospital, and I think that he deserved to be recognized. And I'm very appreciative of how he's been going about his business, and he hasn't been giving me any BS, and he really shows that he has my best interest in mind. And that was really powerful for me because here I am trying to address the situation and making assumptions of how he's interacting with me, right? Because of how he's portraying his emotions or how he's projecting his emotions. And, you know, and in that moment, it was really enlightening for me because I always try to operate in a way where I'm giving myself that pat on the back. I'm letting myself know I did a good job. I can't rely on other people to give me feedback and let me know that I'm doing well at what I'm doing, because a lot of what I do is not observed by other people. It's like a one-on-one basis, and the patient's not going to sit there always and tell me that I'm doing my job well because they don't always understand the job that I'm doing. So for him to go out of his way and do that, while I'm observing him thinking that he's still dissatisfied. Everyone else is observing him thinking that he's grumpy and dissatisfied. And he acknowledged me, and it was just powerful to, I guess, see the power in us being consistent in how we interact with people, because it's very easy to let a grumpy person bring you down to their level and you to reflect to their energy. But what I like to do is to make that person reflect my energy. I'm going to control this situation. I'm going to make sure it's as positive as possible. And if you're not reflecting what I'm doing, I'm going to kind of be in a protective little bubble. I'm not going to be guarded. I'm not going to not allow you to feel this energy, but I am going to make sure you don't take it from me in vain.
Yeah.
Like, I want to make sure when I give you that energy, it's going to come back and be reciprocated. So he reciprocated that energy in a way that I don't really see all the time, because I try to analyze people and understand their emotions and be empathetic. And it was really hard to understand how appreciative he was of my actions until he addressed it in that way.
Yeah. And that really comes from you like trying your hardest. And then if you don't make assumptions about the moment, it ends up just being the best thing that it can be.
Right.
That's really beautiful. I'm glad that he was able to like recognize you for that, so you could see that your efforts are, valued.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Like,
Yeah.
oh, wow.
And it's interesting because I always like to like use basketball as an example of life, right? So it's the same concept. Like the best defenders in NBA history, you think of like Bruce Bowen or Tony Allen, some of these people that were just locked down defenders, they always control the pace.
Yeah.
And they make whoever they're defending come into their pace. So if I speed you up and you're on my level, I control this situation. That's what makes you one of the best defenders in basketball history, is because you know how to make people come to your pace. And when they're not in their rhythm anymore, they're now in your world. You're in control. That's what the greatest people have found, is that I develop a pace, and then when I'm interacting with others, you're going to come to my pace because I'm intentional. I'm conscious. I understand how to manifest this energy into this game. Now, when Tony Allen guards a LeBron James, now we have greatness, right? Because the offensive player has mastered their pace and the defensive player has mastered their pace. And that's why we pay thousands of dollars to watch these people play against each other, because they're two masters battling, right? And that's an archetype, right? We love anime, we love like Avatar, and we love these kung fu movies because a lot of the times it's masters bringing their pace together, and we love to see it. I love watching people try to master something, and then I love it when another person that's tried come together and battle. And that's just like respect and honor. That's why I like the kung fu movie culture, because there's always respect and honor. They bow to each other before they fight. They recognize each other's process of practice before they battle. And they have mad gratitude for their opponent.
And it comes back to like you said, gratitude, the appreciation, the acknowledgement of your opponent being also great at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not dominant in this situation because you're bad at what you're doing.
Right.
I'm dominant because I'm confident and I've been working hard. But I do acknowledge that you have something to offer, and that's why I'm going to take pride in beating you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Some people like to talk crap to their opponent and be like, "Oh, you ain't nothing. Like you don't have any skill. You can't do this." And it's like, why are you so proud of beating them? Then what have you
Exactly.
done? Right?
Yeah, and we've talked about that before. It's funny in the Ip Man movies, which a lot of people have probably seen. It's like the idea in their culture is that you can't open a kung fu school until you've beaten the master in that town. And I love that. It's like how you can't teach unless you're the best, but we have a lot of respect for that process of becoming the best. And in our culture of sports, like we kind of have lost that. We believe that these other people that we meet to battle we're supposed to dominate and humiliate. Humiliation is not a sign of respect for the process of mastery. And that's just something that you should ponder on if you're, truly trying to be great.
And I don't think humiliation is a sign of anyone being a master. I think anyone whose goal is to humiliate their opponent has a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do, regardless of the skill that you're exhibiting. That level of appreciation and gratitude is what is missing for you to unlock the true potential of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Man, that's a really great point. So I guess as we kind of wrap this thing up, I just want to say, like, good luck on your journey to mastery of whatever it is. Good luck on developing a more positive self-talk and recognizing your divine image that's within you. You know what I mean? We can go out in this world and be leaders and really make this a beautiful and better place to live.
Yeah. And again, thank you, because we have appreciation and gratitude, and we acknowledge the people that listen to us. We acknowledge the people that watch us, and whether it's 2 people or 200,000 people, we will continue to appreciate the support, the feedback, and the reflection of this energy so much. All we want to do is put positivity and love into this world. So if you got anything at all out of this conversation, please like it, and then share it with one person, just because we want to continue to spread this love, spread the positivity, spread this ideal that we can help each other grow, and that we have so much we can do within ourselves. But again, we have so much to be proud of. And you know what it is. One love. It's been R&B with Russ and Blake, the podcast.
Peace.